If being independent, ambitious, and kind are good things, why do they make you feel so exhausted and empty inside? Let me tell you something that might shake everything you believe about strength. We've been sold this narrative that independence is power, that needing no one makes you unbreakable. But there's a difference between healthy autonomy and hyperindependence, and that line is drawn in childhood trauma. When you were young and you reached out for help, what happened? Did someone show up consistently, or did you learn that vulnerability meant disappointment, rejection, or even danger? Because here's what happens in that crucible of neglect or inconsistent caregiving. Your nervous system makes a decision. It decides that attachment is a threat to your survival. Your brain literally rewires itself, strengthening the neural pathways that scream you can only rely on yourself, while pruning away the circuitry designed for healthy interdependence. Fast forward to adulthood, and you wear your independence like armor. You pride yourself on never asking for help. You'd rather collapse under the weight of everything than admit you're struggling. You sabotage relationships the moment someone gets close enough to actually support you, because intimacy feels like suffocation. And society applauds you for it. They call you strong, self-made, resilient. But inside you're exhausted. You're lonely. You're operating from a place of survival, not choice. True strength isn't refusing connection. It's having the courage to be vulnerable despite the terror it brings. It's recognizing that your brain protected you when you were powerless, but you're not that child anymore. Healing means learning what your nervous system never got to discover, that interdependence isn't weakness. It's what makes us human. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, I need help, and mean it. You think you're driven by passion, by ambition, by some innate desire for excellence. But let me ask you this. What happens when you achieve something remarkable, and instead of feeling proud, you immediately focus on the next goal? What happens when you accomplish what most people only dream of, yet you still feel fundamentally inadequate? That's not ambition. That's your childhood speaking through your adult achievements. When love, attention, or safety were conditional in your formative years, your developing brain made a catastrophic association. Your worth equals your performance. Every A+, every accolade, every moment someone praised your achievements instead of simply seeing you created a neural pattern that screams, I am only valuable when I'm producing. This is the psychology of compensatory achievement. You're not chasing success. You're running from the terrifying belief that if you stop, if you're just ordinary for one moment, you'll be abandoned or deemed worthless. Your dopamine system has been hijacked by achievement, giving you brief hits of relief that never last, because the core wound remains untouched. You work until exhaustion becomes identity. You stack accomplishments like armor, hoping eventually you'll have enough to prove you deserve to exist. But here's the devastating truth. No amount of external validation can fill an internal void created by conditional love. The research on this is clear. Chronic overachievers show the same physiological stress markers as trauma survivors because they are trauma survivors, just in business casual. Their cortisol levels stay elevated. Their nervous systems never rest. They're perpetually in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for the next way they might fail and lose everything. Real ambition comes from desire. Trauma-driven achievement comes from fear. And until you learn that you are inherently worthy, not because of what you do but because you exist, you'll keep climbing a ladder that leads nowhere but burnout. There's a particular kind of person who always knows exactly what you need, who can read a room with uncanny precision, who never says no, who bends themselves into impossible shapes to keep everyone comfortable. We call them empathetic, kind, selfless. But look closer at the cost they're paying, and you'll see something far darker beneath that generous exterior. This isn't empathy. This is Fawn response dressed up in social acceptability. When you grew up in an environment where someone's mood determined your safety, where anger was unpredictable, where conflict meant emotional or physical danger, your nervous system developed a survival strategy, become indispensable, become so attuned to others' needs that you can prevent the explosion before it happens. Your mirror neurons went into overdrive, your amygdala learned to detect the subtlest shifts in tone or expression, and your sense of self became secondary to your ability to regulate everyone else's emotions. The neuroscience here is fascinating and tragic. Your brain literally sacrificed the development of internal self-awareness for external threat detection. You can tell me what everyone in the room is feeling, but if I ask what you need, you freeze, because in your childhood, having needs was dangerous. Expressing preferences led to punishment, rejection, or abandonment, so you learned to disappear. You learned that your value lies not in who you are, but in what you can do for others. And now in adulthood, you call this compassion, but your body tells a different story. You're exhausted, resentful, anxious whenever you have to set a boundary because boundaries feel like violence to a nervous system trained in appeasement. True empathy has limits. It includes yourself. It doesn't require self-annihilation. But trauma-based people-pleasing is compulsive, indiscriminate, and comes with a bill your body eventually cannot pay. You're not being kind. You're being safe. And there's a profound difference. They called you mature for your age. They praised how you never fell apart, how you handled crisis with such composure, how nothing seemed to shake you. And you believed them. You built an identity around being the strong one, the rock, the person who keeps it together when everyone else crumbles. But let me tell you what was really happening in those moments when you swallowed your tears and numbed your fear. You were dissociating. You were employing a primitive defense mechanism that your nervous system activated because expressing emotion in your environment was either futile or dangerous. When children experience emotions, and those emotions are consistently met with dismissal, punishment, mockery, or worse, they're ignored during moments of genuine need, the brain makes a brutal calculation. It determines that feeling is more threatening than not feeling, so it severs the connection between your emotional experience and your conscious awareness. This is emotional dissociation, and it operates through a sophisticated interplay between your prefrontal cortex and limbic system. Your thinking brain essentially overrides your feeling brain, creating what clinicians call alexithymia, the inability to identify and describe emotions in yourself. You become a spectator to your own life, observing your experiences from behind glass. People marvel at your resilience, while you're secretly terrified that you're fundamentally broken because you can't access what everyone else seems to feel naturally. You pride yourself on being logical, rational, unflappable, but beneath that controlled exterior, there's an entire reservoir of unfelt grief, unprocessed fear, and unexpressed rage that's slowly calcifying into chronic illness, anxiety disorders, and a pervasive sense of emptiness. Here's what the research shows. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They migrate into your body, manifesting as autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease, and neurological dysregulation. Your body is keeping score even when your mind refuses to. Resilience isn't the absence of emotion. It's the capacity to feel fully and still function. And until you learn that tears aren't weakness but release, that anger isn't dangerous but informative, that fear isn't failure but wisdom, you're not being strong, you're just surviving. So, here's what I need you to understand. These patterns, these so-called healthy habits you've been white-knuckling your way through, they saved you once. Your hyperindependent, your relentless achievement, your people-pleasing, your emotional shutdown, they were brilliant adaptations by a child who had no other options. Your nervous system deserves recognition for keeping you alive. But survival strategies that worked at 7 will destroy you at 37. The truth is, you're no longer in that environment. You're no longer powerless. And the behaviors that once protected you are now the very prison keeping you from the life you actually want. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about unbecoming everything you had to be to survive and remembering who you were before the world taught you that you weren't enough. It's about rewiring those neural pathways, one vulnerable moment at a time. One boundary at a time, one felt emotion at a time. It's terrifying because it means dismantling the only identity you've ever known. But on the other side of that terror is something you've been searching for in all the wrong places. Genuine peace, authentic connection, and the radical experience of being loved not for what you do or how you perform, but simply because you exist. Your trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And you deserve more than just survival. You deserve to actually live.